I have to do this, Henry. We have to start different sessions, so I have to do this. Sometimes I have to cut Loretta off, but that's a different thing. So thank you very much, Henry, for your. Of course, thank you, Loretta and Anna, for the last session. So thank you, Henry, and of course, looking forward to the topic. It's an interesting topic. But before that, what do I do, Henry? Do you want to tell us about yourself, or should I? I wanted to show the cover of your book, but first, please tell us about yourself.
Sure, Vikram, namaste. My name is Henry. I am currently based in Southwest Virginia, though originally, like Anna, I am from Ukraine. Добрый день, Anna.
Добрый день, Генри. Здравствуйте.
Здравствуйте. And I work in academia. I teach mediation, conflict resolution, and peace building here at Virginia Tech in Southwest Virginia. But also, Vikram, as you and I talked about before, I have been very, very deeply influenced by many, many teachings that come from India, had spent a lot of time in India, had lived in India, and have been really trying to integrate a lot of the very, very profound teachings of the East into the practice of mediation. So I think that's about me in a nutshell, and that's of course what my book that just came out last week. This is what it's about. It's called "Dissolving Conflict from Within: An Inner Path for Conflict Transformation," and this book is available around the world. In North America, it is available in hardcover. All over the world, it's available as a digital book, and soon it will be available as an audiobook.
And the thing is that Henry and I have done talking books. The episode of that, we've covered the book. And of course, Henry by himself is such an interesting person that half the session was only talking about him and his experiences. Anna, you must listen to his experiences from a lawyer to the inner conflict and that he handled, coming to India, traveling on a motorbike around. So that episode of that, or you can go to YouTube inside Mediator Vikram and Henry, you'll find his episode. And Anna is, of course, from Ukraine. She's had to move out to Spain. She's living there right now. Her husband is still in Ukraine. So, and she's been on that show in Conversations with Beautiful Mind. She's been on that. So that's what the background is.
Well, Anna, before we go any further, I just, because I know my family is in Kiev, they were in Lviv for a while, but now just recently came back to Kiev. So I just want to check in to see how are you and how's your family?
I'm trying to keep calmness. My family, part of the family, men, part of our family are in Ukraine, in Odessa city. They can't cross the border because they are men, they can't move. And the women part of our family are in Europe. We moved in March because it wasn't very safety, and the men of our family decided to evacuate us. We were in Moldova, in the family of our relatives part-time, and then moved further, and now totally in Spain.
And the good part, Henry, is that I love Anna's spirit in the whole thing. She's keeping strong. She's got the good attitude going. I really like that.
Yes, sure. I try not to depressed, not to be depressed, because the first month was very difficult for me, for the whole family, because this separation gives us a very big field of negative emotions, such as the fear, angry, stress, depression. So I try to be much more busy as it is possible. In Ukraine, and now I totally try to be a volunteer to help Ukrainian army, Ukrainian people to gather money and to send to the accounts of the Ukrainian army. Because I understand I'm not a military, I even didn't take a weapon in my hands anytime, but what can I do? I can include all my resources, human resources, and to do what can I do much more better. It could be gathering money, gathering different food, clothes, and sending to Ukraine. And of course, I continue to work as a mediator, as a trainer in communication skills and emotional intelligence. I conduct different trainings for the students, for the children, for the people, on different in different ways. So it could be even social free of charge trainings and webinars. Of course, it could be a private trainings because it is necessary to earn money. And I do a lot of volunteer work and do a lot of volunteer webinars, seminars, trainings for the people who can't pay, who don't have money, but who want to regulate and control their emotions and emotional states.
Good. Well, Henry, what I did was I put out a post about Anna, and of course that she's looking for work. Such nice people from all over the world reached out to Anna. I think that's the nice thing. I called it Mediators United. So that's the hashtag I was using. So that was really nice. And
Thank you, Vikram, for supporting. Thank you. It is very pleasant.
Yeah, please. Loretta is in Nigeria. She's, of course, a young mediator. A young mediator, but a mother of a very cute little kid. You want to say hi to her?
So nice,
so nice to see. Hello, Henry. Hi.
And of course, thing is that we're not going to ask Loretta to speak because when she starts, Henry, your session is gone. We'll have to.
Well, I would much rather listen, I think, to Loretta and to Anna. They probably have a lot more to say than I do. So
Anna, please, you have lots to tell us. But first, you'll have to meet Lily. Lily, you want to meet us, or you don't want to meet us?
hi, Lily.
Hello, good morning. It's so nice to meet all of you. Henry,
Hi,
I'm
Lily.
so excited about your book. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you.
She's written some very nice comments on LinkedIn about your book and everything. So,
yeah.
So Lily, quickly, let's introduce you to, of course, Henry you met. Anna, she's in Spain right now. She's from Ukraine, had to move to Spain because of the situation there. And Loretta is in Nigeria. So a quick hi, because Henry's been waiting to start the session going. So quick hi.
Yes.
And then,
yes. Hello. Let's get started.
Hi.
Perfect. Anna, you said your hi to Lily. Can I ask Henry to go on? Okay. Anna's busy. Perfect, Henry. So please, the topic, of course, the topic is very interesting. Quest for truth in mediation. Although you said dangers of the quest for truth, I removed that. I said, let's keep the topic a little more catchy. So,
well, yeah, I noticed that you removed that, and it's actually quite interesting. Now, my hope is that it's not just going to be me speaking, but this is going to be as much of a conversation as possible. So Anna, Lily, Loretta, please jump in. Because my hope is that we interact and that this is a dialogue rather than a lecture. But fundamentally, Vikram, what I was, and so much of it is influenced by Ken Cloak and his teachings and his teachings about conflict and mediation. So before we talk about mediation and the quest for truth, or the dangers for the quest of truth, let's step back for just a moment and think about conflict. So what do we see conflict as? Do we see conflict, and a very Western approach to conflict is it's a competition between two narratives, right? One is right, one is wrong, and either through the court process or through whatever other process that we have, sometimes through war, whatever it is, the right narrative will emerge, and that's the truth, and the wrong narrative will sort of fade into the background, right? And in many ways, this approach to conflict, this view of conflict, served as basis for the development of many Western systems, right? Including our system of justice, our court systems. Our court systems, in essence, become these, very binary spaces where we are trying to determine who's right and who's wrong. And we are trying to determine what is the truth and what is not. But I think, Vikram, in doing this work, and especially in seeing also in what is happening around the world now, what is happening in Ukraine, what is happening here in the United States, with immense violence we're seeing in our schools and in a lot of other spaces. I think the way we see conflict and the way we see violence and the way we define both has to change. And of course, if that changes, then how we use mediation and what mediation is and how it serves and how other peace building processes serve have to change as well. So if we continue to see conflict in this very binary way as the competition of narratives, then mediation becomes just essentially a sideshow for the court process. And what it does is it softens some edges, right? So in an adversarial court process, the determinations tend to be harder. They tend to maybe have a more definitive answer. What happens in mediation then, if we approach conflict from this old paradigm, is kind of softening of the edges. We soften the edges a little bit. Maybe we come up with a compromise narrative. Maybe we compromise on some of the facts. And I think that's not what's needed anymore. So taking a page from Ken Cloke and taking a page from a lot of the transformative and restorative approaches to conflict, what if we saw conflict not as something that needed fixing, not as something as a quest for truth, but as something that needed healing, as something that needed humanization, that needed expansion, and that needed, and what if we saw conflict as a breakdown in community relations and community interactions? What if we saw conflict as breaking down of the old systems and the new systems of stepping in? And so if we start seeing conflict in that broader term, right, of course, the way we approach conflict and see what we see conflict resolution as changes dramatically. And as we talk about conflict, I also would like to talk about violence, because two are different, but also are tied together. And so to me, when we see violence, so what is violence? Violence is when we try to force our narrative on someone else, right? Whether we're talking about international conflicts like Ukraine now, whether we're talking about interpersonal conflicts, whether we're talking about gun violence, whether we're talking about historically what has transpired, right? What the British have done to India, what the British have done to Nigeria, colonialism, all of that, right? What we're doing, there are different degrees of violence, but in essence, in violence, we are forcing our narrative on someone else because we believe our narrative to be so superior to anyone else's. So then what is the answer to violence? What is the answer to violence? And this has to do with mediation then and conflict resolution. So the answer to violence, in my view, is not peace, not some idea of peace, right? That could be very vague. To me, the answer to violence is inclusion. The answer to violence is inclusion, right? As long as I perceive someone as a Russian and someone as a Ukrainian, and I perceive these two to be different, right? Then violence is inevitable through that identity. The violence is inevitable because there is an us and there is a them, right? So we've talked about this before, Vikram, is if we start expanding this idea of us, if we start expanding this idea of us to make it more inclusive, then the need for violence naturally ceases, because I am no longer seeing this as my narrative and your narrative. The nature of the very narrative expands. And so to me then, the challenge, and this is going to your vision of mediation, is can we make mediation and other conflict resolution processes, restorative justice, conflict coaching, ombuds processes as a way for us to humanize another and to include another. So that the process not just compromises whatever narratives that we have, but actually creates a much broader narrative. And in essence, not only maybe brings about a settlement, but actually brings out a resolution. And bringing out a resolution means that we have to start looking at the very source of conflict. We have to start looking at the very source of conflict. And that brings us to what is happening within each and every one of us. Because ultimately, conflict begins within. Conflict begins with a thought. It begins with a thought that someone is the other. And then we justify their otherness. And then by dehumanizing them, right, we can commit all kinds of cruel and nasty things to them because we do not see them as fundamentally being part of us. So that's my that's my initial blur. What is arising for all of you? I'm curious.
I think Lily has something to say for sure. Yes, Lily, please.
Mm-hmm.
She's really inspired by you, Henry. But yes.
Yes, I've taken 3 pages of notes so far, Henry. So,
Oh my gosh.
although it's a little notepad, but still,
Right.
I agree with everything you said, and I'm deeply concerned with everything going on in the world, but of course, what's recently happened in Texas. And I mean, I had a friend do a whole group text 2 nights ago, just using the F word and just going off. And I didn't even join in, and I had to actually exit out of it because it was so negative. There was no thought of curiosity. Why are people doing what they're doing? There's like dialogue is shut down except for to be negative, which connects people oddly. That's very sad. Negativity in coming from us can connect us with somebody else that aligns with that negativity. This isn't helping. So I'm deeply concerned that dear friends of mine have turned so they're closed. I see it as very closed. And oh my gosh, there's just so many great things you said. I absolutely believe it obviously starts within with our thoughts. And if we're not going to be able to be aware of that and then be aware that other people have thoughts that might be different and what are those thoughts, we're not going to get anywhere. So on one level, I'm so excited. Thank you, Vikram, for doing this, and Henry for your book, and everyone that's joining. I'm so excited. And on the other hand, I feel more sad and discouraged than I feel I ever have been as far as the world situation. It's just really, it's scary, but it's just heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because people that I would see as good are just, I hate to say this, but to me, they're on the same side as the people that are violent with their thoughts, their negative thoughts. So that's what I think in this moment.
So Lily,
yeah, Henry, please.
Oh, I'm so glad you've brought up, and there are a couple of things that I would like to unpack in what you brought up. So whenever we start with the idea, right, that they're good people and they're right ideas and that they're wrong ideas, we're beginning with a very limited view, right? Because this is the view, this is the us and them. And this is what I was talking about before, that if we continue perceiving conflict as essentially competing narratives, so let's take the United States right now, pro-gun rights, right? Pro-gun control. If we start seeing the world in terms of just these two positionalities, we're missing a whole big picture. We're missing a whole big picture that is there, and we're missing a great opportunity. We're missing a great, and this is one of the points of what I hope to, when we talk about our quest for truth. If we're not right now, we take Vikram, we take Anna, we take Loretta, some of the world's top mediators, right? And we say to them, all right, we're going to bring you to Texas and we're going to have you mediate, whether we should have gun control or whether we should have gun rights, right? We have world's top mediators. Is this conversation going to go anywhere, even with all my immense respect to Vikram, to Anna, and to Loretta? My suspicion is we're not going to get anywhere as long as we stay within these two modalities, because they are nothing more than positions. They're nothing more than positions. And in restating these positions, all we can do is we can restate them louder or with more attitude, hoping that once we restate it with more attitude or with more color, or maybe we add a little bit more evidence, we are going to convince someone, that we are right and they're wrong. And that's just not going to happen. So taking what is happening in the United States, first of all, the sadness and the anger that many people are experiencing are not necessarily bad things. And I think we have to be very careful in characterizing them as being bad or negative, or because this is part of human experience. Some people are enraged right now. And again, there is nothing wrong with that. Connecting with Anna, both of our families are in Ukraine and they're enraged by what is happening. In many ways, they're enraged, but towards Russia and towards how Russia started the conflict. Even though I grew up speaking Russian, that's my first language. I suspect Anna, coming from Odessa, probably speaks Russian as a primary language as well. So culturally, right, very, very identical. So there's nothing wrong with anger. There is nothing wrong with sadness. There is nothing wrong with rage. As long as all of those things don't kind of become, there's nothing wrong with all of these if these are in the car, so long as they're not driving us. Right? They can be in the car. We need them. This is important parts of human experience. There's nothing wrong with sadness. There's nothing wrong with anger. There's nothing wrong with rage. If these start driving, if these start picking the radio station, then, we start skewing that way. So what is the way out? The way out is to begin with a sense of wonder. And this is when we talk about mediation, right? Or when we talk about facilitation, one of the first spaces, and how if we were to begin a conversation about, so what do we do about the problem of violence, let's say in the United States right now? I think the starting point of this conversation is to begin with humanity. The shared humanity on all sides, the shared humanity that includes, and this is going to sound crazy, right? That includes even the shooter, even it includes the perpetrators of violence. Now, does it mean that we empathize with them? I will suggest no. This is not about empathy, but this is about compassion.
But
so
Henry, with the risk of
yes.
maybe your chain of thoughts might get spoiled, but a little bit of a background you'll have to give, because there'll be people listening who might not really know what's happening, and because they would not need to know the background because it's important with what you're saying. So a little bit on the background of the situation in the US.
Sure. So, in the U.S., for a number of years now, we've been suffering a pandemic of mass shootings, and just in the past month, there were two mass shootings. One was a racially motivated incident in Buffalo, New York, where an 18-year-old walked into a supermarket in a primarily African-American neighborhood and opened fire. And shot and killed, I believe, 10 people or so. And then the second incident took place in Texas, when an 18-year-old walked into an elementary school and shot and killed 17. I believe it's I don't remember the exact. I think it's
18. I think it's 18 kids. I think.
17 or 18. Maybe you're right. 18.
Two adults and 18 kids. Yeah.
18 kids, and most kids, were there were, I think, 8 or 10 between 8 and 11 years old. So right now, in many ways, the nation, the U.S. is just in horror, right? And this is a constantly in the news. We're seeing the images of these kids, and this is constantly there. But this is part of a long string of violence, generally perpetrated by white men. That's a fact in the United States, who have committed violence actually against several Sikh temples. There was a huge significant spike in that after September 11th in Michigan. There were shootings in a synagogue. There was shooting in churches. Of course, in New Zealand, there was a shooting at a mosque last year. So in the United States, the focus of the debate, of course, we have under the US Constitution, there is the Second Amendment. It's controversial. It's very controversial. Many read it to guarantee the right to bear arms, right? There's a big debate of what does that mean? Does it mean that everyone gets to have, automatic, semi-automatic weapons that are very, very efficient in killing a lot of people in a very short period of time? Does it mean something else? But I think it's a mistake for us to take this complex issue of violence, right? And this is not just in America. It's just in America, the expressions of these violence are very public. There is a very easy access to, military grade weapons that make a lot of these incidents just very large scale. A lot of people are killed. But I think it's a mistake to just focus on these two issues. I think as a starting point, we need to have a truly inclusive dialogue on really the sources of violence. Of course, guns are to me are only a small piece. They're an important piece of the puzzle, but only a small piece of the puzzle. So when we have an inclusive dialogue, what does it mean? It means that we include people from all sides of this issue. It means we include law enforcement. It means we include educators. It also means to me that we include, where possible, the perpetrators of this violence. And we have to listen to it. Look, it's very easy to just say to them and label them, they're deranged, they're insane, they're racist, they're terrorists. Well, yes, then what? Right? Then what? How do we prevent other 18-year-olds from, committing these acts of violence, being so angry, being so disconnected, being so depressed, so discouraged, right? That an 18-year-old kid takes on a gun and goes shoots up some strangers, or goes shoots up a school full of elementary students. So we begin with humanity and humanizing actually all of these individuals. Valerie Kaur, who just wrote a brilliant book, and Vikram, Valerie could be, I think if you can get her, she could be just such a brilliant guest for your podcast. Have you heard of Valerie Kaur?
No.
So she's a Sikh American who's been doing a lot of advocacy, anti-violence and anti-racism advocacy, but that expanded. And she released a beautiful book called See No Stranger. And in that book, she poses this challenge that I think is at the very core of what I was talking about, of really moving away from a quest for some subjective truth in mediation and conflict resolution in general, and really connecting more with the truth of who we are, which is our shared humanity. And how do we get there, right? It's not just a theoretical idea. What she invites is seeing others as part of you yet do not know. And this is such an inclusive and in many ways such a radical concept, but also such a transformative one, right? Could we see these shooters as parts of us we yet do not know? Maybe very violent parts of us, right? But parts of us that we need to know, that we need to discover, that we need to approach with wonder, that we need to question. Could we see, in the war between Russia and Ukraine, if we identify as Ukrainians, could we see people who are dropping bombs, on our families as parts of us that we do not know? Could we see that? And it's very challenging. It's very challenging because it's very easy to dehumanize them, right? And it's very easy to create a caricature of them. And then if we go into some kind of conflict resolution process with them, and we are dealing with a caricature, then whatever resolution arises from that process becomes incomplete, because it's not a resolution process among equals, right? If we don't see someone as part of us, they're not equal. There is no equality. So the first step in any resolution process is creating that space for humanity and humanizing. And this is and the big step there is to say, what is it that we don't know about this person? What is it that we could wonder about this person? And again, especially when we are talking about people we not only profoundly disagree with, but people who maybe even repulse us. People who repulse us, people who we see as so others and so far from us. What is it that we don't know of them? What can we wonder about them? The moment we can wonder about someone, we open that space for humanizing and humanity. The next step, and whether we're talking again in the United States or whether we're talking in Ukraine or other places, is for us to start moving from positions to and through, and this is expanding, right? This is expanding the narrative. Can we move from positions to and through interests, to and through emotions, to and through values, and to and through needs? And Vikram, you and I talked about this before. If we can shift the conversation from positions, most of our conversations, most of our trials, most of what we see in the judicial system, certainly just about everything we see in CNN, or any news network, are purely positional arguments, right? So someone is stating the position, another person is restating the position, and then we engage in a debate. And debates are very harmful. Debates are very, very harmful because debates suggest that there is a binary solution with a clear winner and loser, right? Just imagine, Lily, you're in the United States, so you see our presidential debates or senatorial debates, right? And how much time and energy everyone spends figuring out who won the debate. Who won the debate? Who won the debate? Did this person win the debate? Did that person win the debate? What if instead of focusing on that so much, we shifted the focus to say, wow, today these candidates had a conversation and 5 new ideas for addressing healthcare or education or violence came out. And we don't know, which of these ideas maybe we'll adopt, but wow, we have now 5 new ideas that we haven't thought about before that can address these significant issues. So when we expand the conversation, we move it from the space of a binary debate where we're trying to search for the so-called truth to an expansive dialogue where instead of focusing on our positions, we start at least understanding the interests, emotions, values, and most importantly, needs. And when we come to the level of the needs, fundamentally, our needs are going to be the same. Fundamentally, our needs are going to be the same. Again, taking the example in the United States, right? If we take folks who consider themselves pro or against, and we really examine their positions, the needs are the same. There's a need for security. There is a need for autonomy. There is a need for authenticity. There is a need for connection. There is a need for meaning. There is a need for expansion, right? There may be very, very different strategies to address those needs, Again, that's something that we can work with, but fundamentally the needs are the same. I will suggest, even if we look, and this could be controversial, right? If we look at Russia and Ukraine, right? Two countries engage in a war. If we really look at fundamental needs of both of these countries, if we kind of look at the bigger picture, at the immense environmental concerns both countries are facing, economic concerns, other issues, right? Bordering each other, still dealing with the sort of the aftermath of the breakup of the former Soviet Union, a lot of broken systems. Fundamentally, the needs are the same. The needs are the same, right? So if we can come to that level of the needs, instead of competing narratives, we start creating a new narrative that is larger, that is more inclusive, where instead of taking sides, we can come up with various ideas, right? From whichever side they come, to create a common future, a future that is not seen as divisive. And Nelson Mandela, it was a master of this. I don't know if any of you remember his 1994 inaugural address, but this is probably one of the best political speeches someone ever gave. And, if there was ever a man with a legitimate grievance, Nelson Mandela was it. He spent 29 years in jail, immense personal cost, costed him his marriage, costed him all kinds of things, right? And yet he understood this need for a broader narrative. So instead of coming in and saying, well, we were the oppressed now, and now we're going to become the oppressors, and we're going to take care of you the former oppressors, he created a bigger narrative, right? He created a vision for South Africa that was inclusive, that included both Black and white South Africans. He saw the needs of both of those populations as being the same needs, and he was able to communicate it, and thus create a transition from apartheid that was not, that was not bloody, and then that included truth and reconciliation, which so far, as we see, is relatively unique in the world. And then the final aspect of this approach to mediation or conflict resolution, where we step away from this idea that there's going to be one truth, is exploration. And this is where we have courage to be, again, we come back to courage to be curious. And this is where we start exploring complexity and nuance of every conflict situation, right? This is where we realize that things are almost never as binary and as black and white as they appear to be. There are many, many, many shades of gray in between. And if we step away from just purely positional arguments and positional approaches to conflict, we start seeing limitless, really, opportunities that this potential conflict, this and other conflicts, can bring.
Yes, there's lots that you've told us, Henry. I don't know how many books that Lily has already written into. Has your notebook got finished now? Are there any pages left? But
I just wanted to say, again, I'm just so excited to be part of this. Henry, my background goes 20 years, and I first learned about all of this with Marshall Rosenberg, and everything you said about needs, that was 20 years ago where my life changed, when I realized every single person on the planet has needs, and they're actually all quite similar. But as you said, the strategy to meet those is different. So this, and your idea, when you use wonder, to me, it is curiosity. It is being curious about the other person's experience. The shooter that we mentioned, he had needs. And I think you make a great point with Ukraine and Russia. Everyone's trying to meet their needs, whether it's an individual or a country or a family. And until we can recognize that, we're sort of doomed, because it is us against them. But when we recognize it, then we recognize our shared humanity, and then we can begin, as you said, and open this dialogue. So thank you for letting me be part of this.
But I tell you, Henry, the background is, of course, Lily is saying us and them. She had made this us and them situation. She says, oh, I can't be part of it. I'm not qualified to be part of it. I'm not a mediator. I'm not qualified. I had to tell her, look, there is no qualification required. Please join us. And imagine my one sentence there. And now she's like, I love being here, kind of thing. Yes, Lily.
Right.
So it was that that is us and them that you had created. We had to break that. There was no us and them.
See, that's why Vikram is one of the best mediators in the world, Lily. You see, he's just able to create this very expansive and inclusive space.
And I'm telling you, it is not easy. Because getting her out from there and getting her in here was not an easy task. I mean, I have to sell the concept. Can you imagine? I'm selling the concept to her. But Henry, it's not really dangerous for of the quest for truth. Actually, that is the truth. What you were saying, the inner truth, the truth within the person, the society in general. So I think we're still in that quest for truth. I removed that dangers. I'm okay with that.
Well, I would agree with you. See, Vikram, if we could move towards the exploration from sort of what is my truth and what is your truth, right? How much violence and how much bloodshed has happened over over thousands of years because someone believed they knew the truth. And then they could go to India, and then they could go to Africa and just impose that truth on them, right? Because they know the truth. How much violence and happened, and how much bloodshed. So I agree with you in that if we step away from this idea that someone knows the truth, and we start connecting more with the truth of who we are, right? And the truth of who we are is that we are infinitely and intimately interconnected. And this is what Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. told. This is what Einstein talked about, right? What impacts one impacts all. But if we realize that interconnectedness, the natural consequence of that is inclusion. The natural consequence of that is inclusion. Because if I realize, and this is not saying that we are one or the same, this is certainly not saying that we're the same. There is a lot of sort of new age talk, right? We're one. You go to a music festival, and all the young people are wearing that T-shirt. It's not an intellectual idea. It's experiencing that interconnectedness in the world. And that becomes the ultimate truth of who we are, right? And if we start seeing that, if we start experiencing that, whatever gun laws we have or don't have, naturally violence begins to drop. Naturally violence begins to drop. Because Lily, if I am experiencing you as part of me, if this is my experience, not just some idea that I read somewhere, but this is my experience. My experience is that you are part of me. For me to commit violence against you would be insane. It would be the same insanity as for my arm to start stabbing my leg. Even though both are different, they function different, they look different, all of that. So, and that becomes the ultimate truth of who we are. So yes, Vikram, I am all for mediation and other conflict resolution processes becoming the processes of discovery of the ultimate truth of who we are. But that requires us to move away from the idea that I'm going to go to mediation or to court or to whatever other venue, and I am going to tell my side of the story, as often how we talk about this, right? And then I will prevail, meaning at the end that there will be a winner and a loser, and some judge, a mediator, arbitrator, whoever will say you're right and you're wrong. So the invitation and the vision is that we start seeing mediation and other peace building processes as a way for us to discover the ultimate truth of who we are and to really look at the very sources of conflict, between us, so that maybe that means that there is a longer engagement for mediators. I think it requires a very different training for mediators. I think it requires mediators to have a level of personal practice that makes them much more sensitive to the people in the world around them. But then it changes these processes to these processes that are much, much more transformative.
So I think what you're looking at is, Henry, is something like the quest for the inner truth, quest for the deeper truth, as in something like that. So maybe we'll have to coin the term. You're good at that. You're the academic, so you'll be able to do that. But I think we'd have to, with that dangers, I think I'm very happy that I took that out, because I think the quest is there, but the truth that you think that you're looking for is not really what you should be looking for. There's much more, but only thing, being sensitive enough to even consider looking for it. That sensitization, I think, is the important thing. And how does that happen in society in general? I mean, mediation comes in later. That sensitization there, I think. But this Valerie Kaur seems to be a very interesting person, because, of course, on LinkedIn, I'm just having a look at her profile. She seems really interesting. But the only thing is that she's got just one connection on LinkedIn, so I don't think she's very active there. I'll find.
I don't think. I mean, she's a pretty. Are you talking about Valerie?
Yeah. So I'm just looking at her.
I think I don't know her personally. She is kind of a world. She now became an international bestseller. So she's done a lot of very, very interesting work.
But have you heard this? Did you hear this one? This watch night service address went viral with 40 million views. Did you listen to that? I'll look for it.
Yeah, I've seen it. It's actually quite remarkable, and a lot of what she talks about, I mean, she's an American woman. She grew up here, but so much of what she talks about is also based on core Sikh teachings, and just makes it quite interesting. I check out her TED Talk and her other things, but I just finished reading her book and just found it to be very inspiring and very powerful.
I think we should get in touch with her. Let's see whether we can get her onto the show. But yes, it should be interesting. We need interesting things. Yeah. So Henry, now what are we doing now? What are the steps that we are taking? What are we doing towards sensitization? Are we doing the sensitization, or are we just waiting for that to happen and then they come into the mediation? What are we going to do?
So this is another important aspect of this. This is all of our responsibility, and especially those of us who are in this work, peace building, conflict resolution. And this is where the importance of tuning inward, personal practice comes in. Now, very traditional Western view is that we do mindfulness, we do meditation, we do tuning inward to feel better. So to decrease stress, whatever it is. And Vikram, you and I talked about this before. My invitation is that we start engaging in these practices, not to feel better, but to get better at feeling. And this is something that becomes very, very critical, because getting better at feeling means we increase our sensitivity. And again, when we talk about sensitivity, the Western concept of it is, when we say someone is sensitive, what we generally mean is someone is too reactive. They react too much. But what I mean is when we increase our sensitivity, we're more connected with our life, and therefore with every life. So as people walk into our room, or we are engaged in a mediation process, we can connect more with where people are and with what is needed. And this is where we can truly start living compassion in action. And I think I talked to you about this before, in the mediation and conflict resolution and peace building field, so many people now talk about empathy and the importance of empathy. And I'm not a fan I'm not worshiping at the altar of empathy, because in empathy there is a level of pretending, right? Pretending to be in someone else's shoes. And I think the important reality and the important part of wonder and to realize that we can never be in another person's shoes. We have different conditioning, different experience, all of those differences. You know, in a case of a shooter, someone who goes and shoots, you know, a group of elementary school kids or grandmothers at a supermarket, you know, or Sikh grandfathers at a Gurdwara. I don't know that I want to try to be in their shoes. But this is where we move towards compassion. And that is knowing full well that we can never be in another person's shoes, but being fully connected to their inherent humanity. Now, how can we connect to another person's humanity? By connecting to our own humanity. So we may not know the exact pain they're going through, but if we're connected to our own pain, then we know pain. And then we can connect to that experience. And so through that, this is where the importance of the personal practice comes in, to increase our sensitivity, to increase our connection to our own inner pain, to whatever is arising within us, to understanding our own needs. And then by doing that, we naturally become more inclusive, when we naturally start understanding and connecting with the needs of others.
Perfect. So what I also have to be sensitive about is the need for someone who was on my show, on the session of neurodiversity and mediation. So she's autistic, and she was talking about herself, and I was asking her, okay, she's seen some of my shows, and I said, tell me how I can be more sensitive towards people who autistic or otherwise. So she said that, one, please tell us what this thing is all about. Because what happens is I just start and I say, okay, let's talk about it. So what I needed to do, which I should have started with, is this is the conference which is going on, the World Mediators Conference, which started on 18th, going up till 30th June. Inaugural address was on the 18th by Ken Cloak. All the videos are available on my website. So please, what sessions you can, I mean, of course, people who are manlists can walk into any session. And otherwise, if someone wants to participate, so please get in touch with me. I needed to put that out because I should have done it in the beginning, but I actually, sometimes I just, from one session to the other session, when I'm getting into it, sometimes I do forget it. So that's a little sensitization I have to do for myself. And then
Vikram, maybe if I could add something too, I just want to say a few words about Ken. Ken Cloak, who I think in so many ways is an inspiration for me, inspiration for you, inspiration for this whole movement, you know, and Lily and Anna, probably you're familiar with Ken. Lily, I'm not sure if you are, but you know, Ken Cloak is the founder of Mediators Beyond Borders. And in many ways, he is kind of the sage of the modern mediation movement. And he has several books. His one book that came out probably about 20 years ago, called Mediating Dangerously, that really introduced a lot of these concepts that Vikram and I are talking about now, and saw mediation and peace building really not just as a way, kind of as a sideshow to a court process. You know, ADR, I don't like this term at all, right? Alternative dispute resolution. Alternative to what? But really as a transformative process. So that's where we talk about Ken, and Ken, you know, is Ken has spoken on a conflict with Ukraine and Russia. He's just kind of a sage of mediation that certainly I personally bow to and follow and consider to be one of my inspirations and teachers.
That's why I've called him the grand old man of mediation in the world. And that's why 18th May, I'm celebrating as World Mediators Day. If so, no one else does it, we have to do it. We won't wait for the UN to do it. So, but Anna, you've heard Henry, and of course, he has wonderful things to say. Anything that you want to ask him or make a comment?
Yes, Henry, thank you so much for this speech, for your conversation. And I have one question: how it is possible, and where it is possible to get your book about the conflicts?
So it's available on Amazon. So you're in Spain now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's on the Spanish. No, it's not available. It's available in English. It's not available in Russian and Ukrainian, but it's on Amazon. And all as an ebook, it's on Amazon, available everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Very
You
important.
would
The important
like
thing
if
is,
you.
yeah,
Oh,
please.
go ahead.
So I'm just saying, please watch this episode of Talking
Yeah.
Books that I did with Henry on the book. Please watch it. It's on the YouTube, like I said. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. I
Yeah.
made a screen.
Sure. And then if you're interested in getting a hard copy, then we could send it to you from the United States. But frankly, it's higher cost. So the book is available. It's the same. It's available around the world. It's available in India. It's available in Spain through as an ebook on Amazon. And then we'll see. And Vikram, I think we're still finalizing, but very likely November it will be released in India.
Which you're going to do as with your guru. Are you going to do that?
Yes.
That'll be interesting. That'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So, but now, Henry, the concluding remarks, the difficult ones, the ones that you have to do in 2 minutes. You have to give us that whole wisdom of all that you have said.
Well, so the wisdom, wow, it is hard, but I think the overall idea is that we need to stop seeing conflict as competition of two narratives and see conflict in a more expanded way, right? If we start seeing conflict as a breakdown of community, as we see conflict as something that needs healing, as we see conflict as first signs of even transformation, then the way we approach conflict must change radically. And I will suggest that whatever processes we use, whether it's mediation or restorative justice or anything else, we must use processes that humanize, that expand, and that explore. And then what happens is that we're able to transform even the most difficult, the most challenging conflicts into opportunities for dialogue. Not where there is a winner or a loser, but where there is a convergence and emergence of new ideas and new ways of doing things. And then a final thought on violence. To me, the opposite of violence is inclusion. And so the invitation that I think this time presents for all of us is to live a life of radical inclusion. And that means refusing to other anyone, even people who perpetrate the most heinous violence towards us, towards members of our families, towards members of our community. And how do we include them? We begin with wonder. Can we see them, again, to paraphrase Valerie Kaur, as parts of us we yet do not know? And what can we wonder about? So I don't know, Vikram, did I succeed in summarizing this?
Yes, you did. The only addition that I'll make to that is radical inclusion against all the odds, all the negativity that Lily is talking about, against all that is being pushed to us. Against all that, you have to still do it and find that truth within all that is around us. So Lily, please stay away from that negativity, fight against it, but you will have to, that quest for truth will have to be there. Radical inclusion seems to be the term for today. Radical inclusion. So thank you very much. And Henry, always a pleasure speaking to you, and so nice.
Always. Thank you so much, Anna. Очень приятно вас увидеть. Удачи, надеюсь, что...
Взаимно, очень приятно, Генри. Тоже было очень приятно познакомиться. Как оказалось, мы с вами друзья на Фейсбуке уже.
Great.
Приятно слышать соотечественников, да, за границей. Очень приятно слышать, видеть и радоваться достижениями, успехам их за границей и тому, как они отзываются, откликаются о своей стране, о своих согражданах.
That's
Imagine,
Thank you.
what I'm really waiting for it, because look, when she's speaking in Ukrainian or Russian, I don't know what she spoke in, one of
We're
them.
speaking Russian, actually.
Yeah, so in Russian, the way the flow of her conversation is so different, and when she's speaking otherwise. So I think we
Right.
need that real time kind of a thing that she's speaking. You speak in Russian and let it come out in English. So we have to wait for that, because that flow is so different. Like I've of course spoken to, I mean, Anna in that, in conversation, and I know, I mean, of course, wonderful person, very good thoughts and that spirit.
Mhm.
So really nice. So thank you very much. Thank you, Lily.
Thank you.
Good that we've been able to clear the us and them between us, and we've got you in us and not in them.